SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
Bit of a long weekend you had there, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Took in some soccer, I assume?
Every bit of it.
Well, what's next for the American team?
We will play Bosnia and Herzegovina, which may seem unfair, but that is just one country. We're not playing 2-on-1. That'll be Wednesday night at 7.
Okay.
So you don't have to miss any of the live shows here on SuperTalk Mississippi. As soon as Thunder and Lightning wraps up with Brian Haydad Wednesday night, it'll be kickoff time for USA versus Bosnia-Herzegovina in the knockout rounds. This is the round of 32. And for a quick bit of context, America has made it to the knockout rounds in the last several World Cups. America has only won one knockout round match in our history.
Wow.
And that was back in 2002 against Mexico, 2-0. We beat them 2-0 to then get cheated out of a semifinal in the quarterfinals against Germany with an uncalled handball on the goal line, but nobody's still bitter about that. But, yeah, this is also – it's a golden opportunity for the USA because it's an easier matchup in a knockout round match than we've had previously. It's not to say Bosnia is going to be an easy match, but the way the teams play the game, USA's pressing, attacking style should be enough to handle Bosnia. Not looking past them or anything, but this is also an opportunity for America to show up and show out because they're playing at Levi Stadium where the 49ers play.
Okay, so let me get this straight. If the U.S. team wins in this knockout round, make history, right? Unprecedented is what you said.
It's not unprecedented. We've done it once. We've got one knockout round win. This will be our second.
Okay.
But that would then put us at the round of 16 where we usually wind up. This is just an expanded tournament.
Okay.
And in the round of 16, we would play the winner of Senegal versus Belgium. And Senegal, we played them before the World Cup, beat them. That was a friendly. That's a glorified scrimmage practice kind of thing, so take it with a grain of salt. Belgium beat us in the knockout rounds back in 2014. And Tim Howard stood on his head, saved 16 shots, but still we lost. This Belgium team is not as good as that Belgium team, and this American team is better than that American team. So I feel good about that matchup, but we got to get through Bosnia first. That's Wednesday night. And what I meant about America showing up and showing out is this is the first knockout round World Cup match that the U.S. will play in primetime ever.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So
in 2002, it was being played in South Korea. So the knockout round matches we played there were in the middle of the night, like 1:30 and 2:30 a.m. 2014, our knockout round match was mid-afternoon. You look at 2022 in Qatar. That was a weird one because it was like around Thanksgiving and the holidays. It was mid-afternoon. Or that was actually an early morning kickoff. So this is the first time the U.S. is playing in a match in the knockout rounds at primetime. So I imagine the ratings are going to be amazing.
Well, so that's unprecedented, we can say.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Well, I know one thing. If it's kind of kind of ironic, I would say, because it is the week of Independence Day, the 250th birthday of the great United States. But the reaction from the visitors, especially from the Europeans, if that doesn't just tell you everything you need to know about how special this country is, we take it for granted, and not all of us, but many people do. What's even worse is we got idiots out there that want to tear it down and turn it into to be more like the places from which the people are coming that said, I have no idea it was this great over here. Does not the horse's mouth, as the saying goes, mean anything to these people? Apparently not. They are bound and determined, I think, to convert this country into a socialist wasteland is what I would say. So it's been eye-opening for a lot of people, I would say. But that and some people have risen to fame over it, right? They've become social media famous as a result of their posting, their commentary.
I mean, there's a slim chance that there's actually a World Cup visitor listening right now. I know of at least one that is currently in Laurel, Mississippi right now because his wife is a big fan of the Hometown series. Tomo. If you look for Tomo and look for the British St. George's Cross flag, you'll see him on Twitter. They came into Laurel over the weekend, planning to spend a couple of days while they're going from Texas to Atlanta for England's next match.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got a lot of news to get to today, and we've got, by the way, Representative Shane Barnett at 10:35. He, of course, serves in Mississippi's House of Representatives. You know, the Speaker of the House created some committees during this period between the sessions, 6 to be specific, and they're studying various issues of importance to the state of Mississippi. One of those, of course, involves looking at ways to reform, hopefully reduce property taxes. And Representative Barnett is a co-chair of that committee, and he's going to talk to us about that and other stuff as well. But first, I got to just pass on that I had a great time in your hometown of Tupelo. Saturday night, the Journey concert was there at Huntington Bank Arena. Not a seat available in the house as far as I could tell. Of course, it's a bunch of old folks like me. You know, it's our period, our era. But what a great show. No warm-up band, no front band. Just a solid 2 hours, 40 minutes or so of the boys performing. And it was outstanding, as always. I started thinking about how in the world did they do that. Neil Schon, the lead guitarist, founding member, Jonathan Cain, who joined the band a few years after, but it's been there a long time, responsible, the composer of many of the boys' big hits. They're in their mid-70s. How do they do that every night? That's incredible. Really is. It doesn't matter what your age is. It's incredible. It takes a lot of energy to go out there and perform at your best.
I think part of it is that's kind of the only life they know.
You may be right.
Which is why, sadly, you see some artists that just keep going long after they probably should have hung it up.
You're right. But these guys are still on top of their game, I'll tell you. Now, I got to pass this on for folks that aren't the Journey nuts that I am, of course. One thing you can always count on, Rhino, at a Journey concert is that before they play one of the band's all-time greatest hits, faithfully, I still believe that is the best rock ballad of all time, my personal opinion. But keyboardist Jonathan Cain, who, by the way, whose wife, Paula Cain, she is the spiritual advisor to the president. She works there in the White House. But Jonathan Cain always says some words where he recognizes and honors our troops. And, you know, nowadays in concerts, this wasn't the way when I was growing up, but of course nowadays it's as much a huge video production, right, as it is the production of the actual audio of the bands. But you got these huge screens, all high def. And so in the background, while he's at the piano talking, and again recognizing, honoring, praising our troops, patriotic images. And the one that caught my attention was the iconic photo of the Marines hoisting the American flag on Iwo Jima. I mean, if anything says America, that would be it. And that was followed by a view of Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Monument, while he's talking about it. So it does live, and the people are all clapping and going crazy. So I got to just give the boys kudos for talking about that at every show. Jonathan Cain does that, and he always relates it to this great tune that Rhino's bumping us out with, Faithfully.
Rogers Dab Chevrolet.
Now back to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. I was just talking about the Journey concert at Tupelo. So glad the boys came to the great state of Mississippi. And, of course, Rhino, it's customary for Jonathan Cain, who we're just talking about, the keyboardist. Everywhere he goes, he has a jersey made that, of course, is related to the area. So he had a Tupelo High School blue and gold jersey on, Cain on the back of it. And he wore that for about the last 30 minutes or so of the concert. That's pretty cool. And he's always good about that. But certainly honoring our precious warriors and making a point of that and talking about it being the week of Independence Day, that's just good to see at a rock concert like that. Always fun. But we enjoyed it. Yeah, Andy and Jackson says, great concert at Tupelo. Arnell Panetta, he's the lead singer now. Since, it's hard to believe, Rhino, 17 years. 17 years. Man, just yesterday it seemed like they found this guy. His first concert, of course, he's from the Philippines in Manila. And it's out there on YouTube, all in HD. That was actually still kind of a new thing, as you remember, back then.
Oh, yeah.
But Andy says Arnell has an incredible amount of energy to be almost 60 years old. I agree. It's incredible how that guy can jump around and throw the mic stand up and down and catch it, twirl it and all that stuff and do splits and high jumps. Really is cool. A lot of fun, though. Let's see. Gerard, my wife and daughter and I were there to see Journey Saturday night. Me and my wife's first time and my daughter's second time to see them. They were phenomenal. I hope to see them again in the future. Yeah, that's my seventh. Unfortunately, I did not get to see them with the great Steve Perry. I couldn't afford it back then where they were in their prime. But certainly a lot of dadgum fun. No doubt about it. And Mississippians turned out. Saw a lot of folks I know and people, of course, that tune into the program. And your hometown of Tupelo showed out. Just want you to know that. Everything was great. Everything was fantastic. Of course you would expect that. The great state of Mississippi. So, cool stuff. The big news of the morning, though, is the Supreme Court. They've been busy handing down decisions. I think the first one, Rhino, we got to talk about is the decision that concerns the state of Mississippi in a big way. Because the RNC, just a little background here and a little clarification, decided to sue the state of Mississippi, named our Secretary of State, sitting Secretary of State, Michael Watson, as the defendant, and the RNC sought to ban the practice of considering ballots received after Election Day. Only talking about federal elections, just to be clear. In Mississippi, we do have a 5-day grace period. The ballot is mailed, it is postmarked by Election Day. On Election Day, it has that date on it in the postmark. We count them for 5 days. By the way, contrary to, I think, the popular, widely held belief, you know this, Rhino, that came about in 2020. It's a COVID-era law, thinking most people are going to need to mail in their ballots, not go to the polls in person and so forth. So that it's a relatively new law in Mississippi. And so the Supreme Court says, yeah.
I think part of the reasoning was also they were expecting an influx of mail-in ballots, and they were worried they were not going to be able to get them counted.
That is true. Yeah. Because in the state of Mississippi, we need to be clear, our law says you can't start counting absentee ballots, including mail-in, until the polls close on Election Day. Every state has different laws around that. You often hear, why has Florida got their numbers in on election night? By the way, in the last presidential election, more absentee ballots cast in Florida than in person. Yet they still had their numbers on election night. The reason is because Florida law allows counting of absentee mail-in ballots as they are received. They scan them, they're in the systems as they are received. They don't just accumulate them and stick them in a box somewhere. That literally is what we do in the state of Mississippi. And then when the polls close, okay, go get the ballots out of the box and start. It's true. Open them up, counting them, and throwing them in the mix. Now, in Mississippi, generally speaking, it doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is the number of absentee ballots, because you have to, they know the number because you have to apply for that. And, of course, even if you vote in-person absentee, they still know how many were cast on that basis relative to the total number counted from Election Day, in-person voting. And so unless it's super close, it doesn't matter. If you counted them all and every one of them went for, say, the candidate who's behind in a race, not enough to overtake the leader in the race. But in some states, that's not the case. But the big thing is the Supreme Court said, yeah, if they're postmarked by Election Day but arrive a few days later in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court said, that's cool, that's fine. This is actually a blow to the RNC and to the Trump administration. Again, it's not a big deal in Mississippi. And then the question is, why in the world did they decide to name Mississippi as a defendant? And I think it may have been in your absence, State Senator Jeremy England, who heads the Elections Committee in the State Senate, he sent me a very nice, clear, succinct explanation. Said it's because of that particular federal court. The RNC felt like in the 5th district in which Mississippi sits, the chances of a favorable opinion were better than in other federal courts where they didn't think they'd be as friendly, such as the 7th in California. Honestly, it kind of makes me mad. It shouldn't be that way.
Is it 7th or 9th?
It may be the 9th. Maybe the 7th is another one that's also sort of liberal leaning. Courts shouldn't be conservative or liberal, in my view. In fact, I would argue the conservative position is the correct one because in general, as conservatives, we believe in, just interpreting the law as it was designed, as it was written.
7th or 9th would likely be liberal because 7th is Chicago and 9th is out west.
Okay. I knew the 7th was in that mix. So bottom line is the RNC said, well, let's go sue Mississippi because it sits in the 5th court district and we're likely to get a more favorable ruling. It wasn't because they didn't like the way Mississippi although that's true, it wasn't because Mississippi was kind of the poster child for this, because we're not, honestly. It's just they were looking for a favorable ruling. Unfortunately for the RNC, though, and for those that oppose the consideration of ballots received after Election Day. The court said, no, that's cool. You can do that. 5-4 decision. No state, you should know, allows the counting of ballots that are postmarked after Election Day. But there are laws in 14 states, some red, some blue, that allow a general grace period for ballots to arrive if voters drop them in the mail by Election Day, and they get postmarked, Mississippi being one of them. Now, let's be clear. This is not a problem in that, oh, geez, Mississippi's going to still keep this practice up, continue this practice of allowing ballots to be received after Election Day as long as they're postmarked by Election Day to be counted. Our legislature could change this in statute because this is a statute. All the court said is, no, if you want to do that, states, you can. The courts didn't say, Mississippi, you must continue that practice. You know what I'm saying? I want to make that
the statute is constitutional.
That's right. So if our lawmakers get back in session in 27 and say, we're going to change that, no more consideration of ballots after Election Day, even though they're postmarked by Election Day, we can do that. Honestly, that ain't the problem. The problem is California, where they just say, oh, it's 2 months later, we just got the ballot. Yeah, throw that one in there. So it's in those states. And, in fact, it's in California where they mail a ballot to everybody. That's what gives rise to fraud. That's the risk of election fraud, is when millions of ballots get mailed out, whether you requested it or not. In Mississippi, you've got to have an excuse, and you've got to request. And then you got to go vote and have somebody notarize it. So it's a little different.
When you got a 5-pound box of ballots showing up to a 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment.
Totally true. That's where the fraud occurs.
Fishy.
That's what creates fraud. So, unfortunately, this decision, again, Mississippi happens to be named as the defendant, but it has applicability across the country. That's where it's a problem. So California can keep doing their crap, and Pennsylvania, especially, it's a big deal in the swing states because that's where elections are won or lost. Honestly, it likely wouldn't matter in California one way or another. It leans so far to the left. So, a blow to the president and to Republicans with that decision. Coming right back with Representative Shane Barnett. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Oh, mama, I can hear you a-crying. You're so scared and all alone. Hangman is coming down from the gallows, and I don't have very long.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's a short show Monday. Ricky Matthews, Super Talk Outdoors. He'll be on at 12:05 today. But right now, it's Representative Shane Barnett, serves, of course, in the Mississippi House, represents District 86, which includes Greene, Perry, and Wayne counties, chair of the House Local and Private. What's going on there, Representative Barnett? Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Gerard. Thank you for having me on. It's just a pretty Monday morning down here in Wayne County.
It absolutely is. A little warm, but it is about to be July in the state of Mississippi, so we're certainly no stranger to that. But I'm just glad we got that rain out of there. It rained quite a bit down in your area, right?
It did. A little too much.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll still have a few watermelons to go around on the 4th.
Absolutely. Certainly a 4th of July staple here in the state of Mississippi, and, man, they make some good ones down there. All right, so you guys have been busy in the intersession here between sessions, and the Speaker, of course, created 6 committees to go study various issues of importance in the state of Mississippi. One of those is property taxes. And, man, I know you hear it. We hear it as well here on the C Spire text line. But that is a tax that everybody kind of loves to hate, and the people are wanting some relief. You guys are doing some work on that. What's the status?
Well, right now it's strictly a fact-finding mission. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, just trying to see what, and a quick rundown for some of the listeners that maybe don't understand how the property taxes are figured. Your local tax collector, either in-house or through the contract with an appraiser, comes up with a value on your property, and that is called the true value. That is then multiplied by a percentage. For homestead properties is 10%. For pretty much all other real estate, it's 15%, and then for vehicles, it's 30%. But if you take the true value multiplied by the percentage based on the type of property, that gives you the assessed value, which is then multiplied by the county, city, or school millage rate, and that's the tax that you owe. And so what we're doing is tracking down, seeing how much each category is worth across the state. And the only thing that we've been charged with by the Speaker is just provide as much relief as we can to the taxpayers of the state.
Okay, got it. So this is interesting in that you've got a committee there, and I just want to point out, you and Representative Trey Lamar are serving as co-chair of this committee, and that's why we got you on. So you've had a couple of meetings, or how many have you had, Representative Barnett?
We've had one meeting. We're going to have at least two more, possibly more.
Okay.
Going to try to hear from as many stakeholders. This is a complex issue. Anytime you push a button or move a lever over here, it changes, has unintended consequences, elsewhere. And so we want to make sure we get it right. We're going to hear from everybody. But there's not even a draft of a bill out there yet. We're still strictly in the fact-finding portion of this.
And I assume then when you talk about working with stakeholders, but which would include, of course, mainly local government folks, school districts, counties, and cities, they rely quite heavily on ad valorem taxes, property taxes to operate. But you're getting input, I assume, and information from the Department of Revenue. Is that right?
That is correct. We want to, of course, anything that we do that provides relief to the taxpayers will cause some reduction in funds to our local entities, and we're obviously not going to leave them totally missing out on this. So we've got to come up with ways to fill in that gap, and so we want to hear from other states that have taken measures. It's amazing how wide of an array of options other states use to collect this money. Some have done local option sales taxes.
Yeah.
Tennessee, for example, on their car tags, they just do a flat fee. It's not based on value like it is here.
Right.
So there's a lot of options that we're looking at.
Right. But as you know, just for the benefit of our listeners, it's something we've mentioned many times on the show. Virtually all these other states do have local options of sales taxes, and that's where they generate revenue. But thus, their sales taxes are more expensive. We had Leah Long from the National Federation of Independent Business. We had her on last week. She oversees that organization's efforts in Mississippi and Louisiana, and she was talking about in her parish, I don't know which parish she lives in, she said standard retail sales tax is 11%. Because there's the state component, as you know, like we have in Mississippi, but then they got these local options for the parish in the city. But that's how you're able to keep property taxes down, which includes car tags, the ad valorem component of car tag. Same in Florida, same in Alabama, Tennessee. It's just a matter of how you want to pay, I guess.
It really is. Everything's road paving, all the maintenance, everything's getting more expensive. And, the one complaint that I've heard as far as property taxes was this most recent reevaluation cycle that we had. A lot of people saw 20, 30, even 40% increases, and that was just because the true value got refigured, and so the millage rate never changed. And that's other things we're looking at. Some states cap how much those reappraisals can go up. Right. Every 4 years. there's a lot of moving parts to this, but we're determined we're going to find some type of relief for our taxpayers. I think it's long overdue, and we've got a good team working on this.
No, I agree. I think it's good that the Speaker said this is an issue we need to talk about, because I can't remember, honestly, the last time the legislature really had any serious discussions around property taxes. But I'm sure you hear it from your constituents. We hear it here on the text line. I hear it just out and about in various venues and settings, and I know your colleagues here as well. This is something, again, people really don't like, and I think you're right. What really got their attention is when the Department of Revenue said you tax assessors need to go out and reassess. Then everybody, not everybody, but many people got an increased tax bill, property tax bill, as a result, without government taking any action other than just reassessing property.
That's right. And to give you a little bit of an idea of how popular of an issue this is, one of the early on discussions about eliminating the income tax one of the bills had a version of eliminating part of the county car tag fees.
Okay.
And I was given a quick update, and I just glazed over the top of the income tax cut, and I got a few oohs and ahs, and then I got the part about cutting the car tags, and I got a standing ovation out of that part. It's really it's something that folks pay attention to. I
don't doubt it, but as you know, that's the ad valorem taxes on vehicles, which would be personal property, car tags, and then property taxes. That is the main primary source of revenue for our counties.
It is. It is. It's a big chunk, especially our rural counties here that, that's where they generate their funds. And so anything that we do that's going to cut some of that money, we're going to have to replace. And, we're looking at all streams of revenue, whether it be current or maybe something new. There's a lot of options out there. Yeah.
The counties, just a reminder for our folks, do not participate in sales taxes. They don't get a diversion. The cities do. So if a transaction occurs outside of a city and a county, that money stays with the state. None of that goes diverted back to the county. It is when it happens in a municipality, but they get a lower amount of the property taxes.
That is correct.
The big recipient, of course, is school districts of our property taxes. Last I checked, Representative Barnett, 50%, maybe a little more than 50% on average is the participation level of school districts in ad valorem taxes on real property.
That's right, and that's another place. Anything that we cut, the state has got to make whole on that. So it's a big task. It's statewide. There's about $36 billion of assessed value on the rolls.
Okay.
Some of that spread, between the 10, 15, and 30% categories. But any change we make is going to take a big number to fill that hole.
Absolutely. What are you hearing from any of the other committees, Representative Barnett, while we got you? You're hearing anything on school consolidation? I know your colleague, Rob Robertson, working on that.
He is. I've not touched base with him in the past couple of weeks, but last I talked, he had a full schedule of meetings this summer and fall, and in anything that happens with that, I have full confidence he'll do a wonderful job.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's good. I think the committees the Speaker put together are spot on, are relevant, redistricting, judicial operations, of course, school consolidation, specialty schools. I think government efficiency, as I recall, was another one, and then the committee you're on, property taxes. These are all areas of interest. But
it is, and it's something that you don't just pop up on January 1st with a bill.
Right.
It takes some studying, and we want to get it right.
I like it. Representative Shane Barnett has been our guest. Appreciate you coming on, Representative Barnett. Talk to you soon, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Gerard.
Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
America's 250. You're listening to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us today. We were just talking about these Supreme Court rulings being handed down today. The big one, of course, that concerns Mississippi. Really, it will apply across the nation, but Mississippi and our Secretary of State was a defendant. The RNC sued to not allow ballots to be considered, even though they were postmarked by Election Day, but received after Election Day would not be eligible for consideration in federal elections. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's actually okay. So, again, not a big deal in Mississippi. And I would not be surprised, Rhino, if our legislature doesn't act in the 27th session by introducing a measure that would change that and revert to the pre-2020 environment, which says, no, it's got to be received by Election Day to be counted, I should say. But the big thing, of course, is the other states. This essentially paves the way for the other states to continue their practice of counting ballots received after Election Day. And I still maintain where the big risk is for election fraud and election anomaly is this mass mail-out. And that, by the way, is what the president has said. Just to be clear, he seeks to end the mass mail-out of ballots, not mail-in when requested. He himself votes using in Florida. He's a resident of Florida. He uses that method. He requests a ballot within the county from the equivalent of our circuit clerk, says, send me a ballot, fills it out, sends it back in, but requests it. That's different, as you say, when they just send boxes, literally, to one single address. You know there's something going on. And they don't care to clean up their voter rolls because that makes it harder to cheat, is the bottom line. So the combination of crappy voter rolls and this mass mail-out, and you looked it up, we looked it up the other day, like 7 states, I think, have the mass mail-out. California, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, Colorado comes to mind, something like that. When it really becomes a problem, in my view, is if it's Michigan and Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Should they adopt that practice? Because it turns out that's where federal elections, certainly the presidential election, they tend to be won or lost in those 3 or 4 states. I don't think it matters, honestly, in California, Oregon, and Washington. It could matter in Colorado. I think it's one of the states, is it not? You see that?
Yeah, it's Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Vermont, and D.C.
Okay. Gotcha. I don't know why I had Hawaii in there, but Hawaii's not.
Hawaii's in there, too.
Okay. I had that right. But Vermont's kind of the outlier. It's the only one that's like east of the Rockies, I guess, that's involved. It could be an issue in Nevada. That's kind of evolved into a purple state, though they don't have a lot of electoral votes. It's an issue in Pennsylvania and in Michigan in particular, those 2 states, Wisconsin to some extent, North Carolina. They're sort of the quintessential purple states that also have a significant number of electoral votes that could make or break a presidential election. But what this decision out of the Supreme Court essentially does is says, yes, states, you can keep doing that. So, interesting that came out. The other one is that I guess you could have to chalk it up as a loss for the Trump administration is the president cannot, at this point, terminate a Fed governor. Now, on the other hand, the other decision that came down is one that I think is good, and I think a win for conservatism and for the president, and this just happened within the last hour, and it basically reins in the agency complex, the faceless bureaucrats. We've talked about it many times that I think have a bigger impact on our daily lives in this country than the people we elect. That was not the founders' vision. So this dealt with, I believe, Rhino, the crux of the case was the Federal Trade Commission, but this would apply across the entire gambit of agencies, the range of agencies. Yeah, they in fact do report to the president, whom the people elect. So the people have control of those agencies, not vice versa, where these bureaucrats get in charge and they just go rogue and go crazy and do whatever the heck they want with impunity and without any checks and balances.
Some of them tell a sad enough story when they get caught that they get paid. Looking at Peter Strzok.
A good example. So the good news is the Supreme Court said no, the president is in charge and can hire and terminate at will in those agencies. That's the way it should be. Fox News, SuperTalk News up next, and we're coming back. Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on Super Talk, Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Yeah, we rocked to that one Saturday night, of course, Rhino, as we did all the others that we play here as we kick off the top of the hour, the 3 hours on Middays. Yeah. So, the New York Times, their headline concerning these Supreme Court rulings, and in particular the one I was just talking about, where the court said, yeah, the president actually can fire and hire independent regulators. Those would be the faceless bureaucrats that work in the agencies. But they stopped short of that with respect to the Fed because it's a bit more independent. I think they got it right in that respect. But the New York Times, this is wrong. I'm just going to say that before I read you the headline. Supreme Court expands presidential power over regulators. No, they didn't. They got it back to where it was supposed to be. That the people, the person, in this case, the president, that we, the people, elect, acts on our behalf. Not unelected, faceless bureaucrats in the agencies. That's caused more damage to this country than any people we've ever elected. They got it right. And this is just another, right, in a string of rulings that have come out of the court that have reined in the power of these faceless bureaucrats in these agencies. You can't help but think about James Comey as an example. Just one of the many. Lois Lerner's the one I remember. She of IRS for fame back in the Obama era. And she was up on the Hill testifying because her agency was denying applications for nonprofit status from conservative organizations. And just had her nose up in the air. You remember that crap? I could still see her sitting in the U.S. Capitol testifying. And she was like proud of it. That's what the Supreme Court just said, no, you can't do that. And if you do, by the way, and the president says, well, you're not performing in accordance with the standards we expect, I, as your boss, expects, you're gone. That's the way it ought to work.
Which is why eventually you have to quit giving these miserable loser leftists the benefit of the doubt. You have to throw Hanlon's razor out, because Hanlon's razor says, never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by incompetence or stupidity.
That's so true.
At a certain point, you got to throw that notion out and just realize, no, these people aren't stupid and incompetent. They're just evil.
Yep. Unbelievable. On the C Spire text line, my car tag was $169 in Midland, Michigan, and $42 in Gulfport, Mississippi. interesting. I didn't look up the ad valorem tax rate or just the structure of how car tags are priced in Michigan versus in Mississippi. But as you heard Representative Barnett say, in some states like Tennessee, you just pay a fee, just a flat fee. In other states like Mississippi, there's a fee component and there's an ad valorem tax component because it's considered personal property, not to be confused with real property, which is real estate in general, your home, your land, your farms, your businesses. So it's one of the primary sources of revenue for our counties in Mississippi, property taxes. I say that because municipalities, again, receive a sales tax diversion. Most of it goes to the state, and in fact, it is the top source of revenue for the state government in the general fund. It's about 38% of total revenue. Income taxes are about 28%. So you do the math there. Just under 70% of the revenue that funds general fund functions and spending in the state of Mississippi at the state level are derived from sales taxes, property taxes. But I believe it's 18.5% of the sales taxes collected when the transaction occurs inside the city limits is sent back to the city. That's their primary source of revenue. Property taxes, for the most part, are second to that. It just depends on how much property exists within a city. But at the county level, they don't get that diversion of sales taxes. They rely on property taxes. School districts, of course, 55% of their funding comes from the state, and then roughly 30%, 25%. It differs by district. I'm just using averages here. 45 to 50% from the state, 25 to 30 from local, and then the remaining from the Fed. So it's state, local, Fed. The local taxes in school districts, that again is a component of your property taxes. If you look at your property tax bill, you'll see that school districts get the vast majority of it, followed by counties, then cities if your property is within the city limits. So, I just say this, that every state has a different model. And they get their money one way or another. It's just kind of pick your poison. How do you want to be taxed? My preference is consumption. And that is, I think, consistent with conservative philosophy that taxation of consumption is a more fair tax. So I would be okay of converting our tax process, our tax structure, to one that primarily is based on consumption and not on income or property.
The main problem is the other side of this argument only believes something is fair if it benefits them in some way.
Yeah. I would agree. And that's kind of how they look at it. Yeah. So then did you catch, though, that Representative Barnett, Rhino, said, yeah, we're going to have to figure out a way to cover. Anything we reduce, we cut back on, we're going to cover from the state. Well, I have concerns about that because we're eliminating the income taxes, I expect revenues to start to trend downward as we dip more into our sales taxes. Now, this year, we're at 4%. Last year, it was 4.4%. 4% is levied on all taxable income above $10,000. That's after you take the exemption and the standard deduction, all the above. Then the first $10,000, no tax. Everything over that in Mississippi in the year of 2026, tax year 2026, subject to a 4% tax rate. Next year, that will fall to 3.75, and then quarter point increments for the 3 years subsequent to that. And then the triggers kick in the tax reform bill that was enacted in 2025. That would be HB1. And a calculation is made to determine if the state can reduce the income taxes. It's basically a financial status calculation, if you will. However, remember there were drafting errors with respect to the decimal points in that legislation, but and that was done over in the Senate, and the House said, sorry, we're moving forward as is. So the point is those triggers, pretty much worthless. They don't really mean a lot because of the decimal point error in the drafting. So that's an issue, but we're going to still do that test in accordance with law. I believe we're going to meet the test, meet the standard because of the decimal point error that throws the calculation off, certainly not what was intended. And what that means is that we're going to reduce the income tax at the maximum amount of 0.3% maximum amount allowed prescribed in the law based on that financial test, 0.3% per year for 10 years. So, to recap, right now we're at 4%. Next year we go to 3.75. The 3 years after that will take us down to 3. The 10 years following that, I believe we'll chip away at that at 0.3% a year, unless the legislature changes anything, because the test that's included in the law that the legislature must process, must run to determine if we can move forward with an income tax cut, I think is going to be satisfied easily. If it's not, we got big problems, honestly. So 0.3%, all that means starting now in 14 years we get down to 0% income tax. But this is interesting what the House is working on in addressing property taxes. Maybe the most lamented tax of all, the car tax and the ad valorem taxes on your real property. We'll see where all that lands us. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. So I was just looking back, Rhino, at the law that placed in motion elimination of the income tax and the drafting error again. And recall that the trigger, the economic trigger, it was pretty straightforward. It basically said if you start out by calculating what the amount of a 1 percentage point of personal income taxes generate. So just for argument's sake, let's say we have a 4% income tax rate and we collect $2 billion. So 1% percentage point, or 25% of the collections, that's a quarter of 4, of course, that's roughly $500 million. So the way the calculation was supposed to work is if 85% of that, so that's what, 435? 25? If 85%, $425 million, if the difference between the current collections by the state in income taxes and next year's appropriations, in other words, a surplus, essentially, of at least that $325 million, well, then you can cut the tax rate. So it basically says, let's make sure you got a cushion. here, and you're in good shape with respect to revenues collected this year and appropriations next year. Compares the two. If the revenues exceed the appropriations by that $325 million, boom, cut the income tax by 0.3%. The problem is the bill doesn't have 85% of that 1 percentage point. In other words, the $500 million, it has 0.85%. That's $5 million. So basically what we're saying is, hey, state government, if you think your revenues next year are going to be $5 million more in a $7.4 billion budget than what you expect to spend, you can proceed with cutting the income tax. $5 million. You're creating a cushion of $5 million, a safety net. That's the error. I don't know what's going to happen when we get to that point 4 years down the road. I really don't. But that's what's in law, just to be clear to everybody. That was the mistake that was made, but it went forward. Had a big signing ceremony. Remember that at the mansion.
And I maintain zero sympathy for the Senate. Because if they're going to drag their feet on every single conservative policy put forward by the House because they're worried about, oh, we might mess something up. Well, you messed something up because obviously you can't double check yourselves. How many eyes saw that? How many hands did it go through? And you still tried to cry uncle and say, hey, give it back to us. We want to fix it. No! It
really is incredible. And, you know, it's I respect those guys a lot, and I have good relationships. I know my good friend, Senator Josh Harkins, as you know, he's the man. He's the finance man over on the Senate side. His counterpart, Trey Lamar's Ways and Means in the House. And I got to tell you, he was beside himself after this, but it does make you wonder, how did he go through that many sets of eyes? And the lieutenant governor's a tax lawyer on top of that. It went through his eyes as well. You know,
it's almost like they don't read nearly as much as they claim or get you to assume they do.
You wonder if this is something, of course, this was kind of before this became more common. You could have submitted that to a couple of the popular AI tools. And you could have, you had to be creative in whatever the prompt would be, right? To sort of test the trigger for reasonableness, right? You'd have had to do that. You could have just said, hey, tell me what the trigger is. That wouldn't give you the result you're looking for. You'd have to, test the trigger. What does this mean, based on past collections and appropriations, something like that? And it would have spit out something and said, well, yeah, it's only $5 million, so you're in good shape there, given that you're generating $300 million surpluses the last 4 or 5 years. So that's where we are. Derek in Greenwood says property tax increases are running people out of town. In Greenwood, mine jumped over 1,000 year to year and are scheduled to go up again. I hear you, Derek, but okay, if they ran out of town, did they move somewhere else in the state? And did somebody buy their property because now they got to pay it? So as long as you're the owner listed on the rolls, you still got to pay until somebody buys it. Your property till the title's transferred. Thus, the responsibility for the taxes. And I also wonder, Derek, I hear you. So you're right. The appraisals, for the most part, increase the value of everybody's property. Now, that's the good news is your property's worth more. The bad news is you don't get any cash for that, but your property taxes go up. That's why the complaint, a reasonable complaint. In some counties, the supervisors reduced the millage to offset. I think our friend Larry in Mize that tunes in every day, I didn't get a chance to read it, but I saw it after the show. He informed us that they lowered the millage. I believe he's an alderman in Mize, if I'm not mistaken. And they went to the supervisors and said, yeah, we want to lower the millage so that nobody realizes a property tax increase. And I think DeSoto County acted as well. There's some others, but some just let it flow. In which case, you got a higher property tax bill
Because some already had pie-in-the-sky ideas of what to put their name on so they could get reelected.
That's basically, unfortunately, true. But where I was going with what we heard from Representative Barnett is I do have some concerns about, is the state going to have the money to cover? If let's just say that they come out of this and say, okay, we figured out a way, or we believe we should require our counties, school districts, cities to reduce the millage on property taxes, or maybe limit it, or some states they tie it to inflation. You can't just willy-nilly increase the millage unless the cost of things have gone up, and that's essentially calculated by inflation. So I don't know what's going to come out of that. And you heard Representative Barnett say, look, we're just collecting information at this point. We'll have more meetings. And, I don't think, as he said, we're not going to have any legislation ready to go when the session kicks off in 27, but perhaps a framework for some ideas. But here's where I'm going is, man, I don't know about the state. If in fact the property taxes are reduced, school districts, counties, cities, maybe, it depends on how you structure it, could be subject to receiving less revenue. The state's going to cover that by sending them a check. Well, I'm worried about the state having money to do that, given our property tax, our income tax being phased out. I think the state's going to be set to see some challenges just in that. And not this year, but in subsequent years, that certainly could be an issue. And then, of course, we keep spending more money as well. This is something that I questioned our lieutenant governor about. You heard me, Rhino, in the show but last week. And the reason is because, in a respectful way, I think when you tell people, hey, look, we shrunk government, would you agree with me that for the most part when people hear that statement, what comes to mind, what they believe based on that statement, the conclusion they form is, oh, we're spending less money. Would you agree?
Yeah.
But we're not. And that was the point I made with the lieutenant governor, again, in a respectful way.
It's the disconnect between politicians and the people that vote for them. The people that vote for them hear, oh, we shrunk government. That means cuts. To a politician, we shrunk government means we didn't grow it quite as fast.
And that is the case at all levels of government, it feels like. But that was the case here in the state of Mississippi. And I simply asked the lieutenant governor, but the budget this year is more than the budget last year. How does that equal a cut? And I think you remember he said, well, the original budget we had was like $40 million less, but that ain't the one we put in law, which is what matters. And as you recall, Medicaid showed up, said, not only do we have a $50 million deficit from last year, you guys got to make us whole on, we want $400 million more. 400.
It's also disingenuous to say you shrank the size of government by not filling positions that haven't been filled in over a decade.
Exactly.
You just took a job offering off the board that nobody was going to fill to begin with.
An authorization for a job that wasn't ever going to be hired. That's absolutely correct. Because I think the number that he shares is 1,500. Now, when I hear that, I think, well, that means that the payroll this year is 1,500 fewer people than last year. Would you agree?
Yeah.
That's not what happened, though.
Nope.
And if it had, we'd have people raising hell all over the place. That would be massive news. 1,500 people no longer working in state government. I'm not saying there's not room to cut some of those people currently working. Coming right back, half an hour of middays.
From the Seabrook
Middays with Gerard Gibert. It is on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us on the C Spire text line. Texas has no state income tax. I traveled for 2 weeks through Texas. Everywhere I bought something, I paid a state sales tax, county sales tax, and a city sales tax. Absolutely right. And that's a point we've made many times. In the state of Mississippi, we have a 7% sales tax. I think we have 2 cities, you and I researched that, Jackson and Tupelo, right, that have a local option. I think you looked it up. Tupelo's is like dedicated to their water infrastructure or something like that, like 0.5%. Jackson has a 1%. And again, in Mississippi, if a municipality wants to add a local option, I believe they have to get permission, authorization from the legislature, and then the people have to vote on it. And
Jackson's a 1% local tax. Tupelo's a 0.25% local tax.
Okay. I said 0.5. I think that's it. Now, there are restaurant and lodging taxes scattered about throughout the state. That's for the most part thought to affect those traveling through, and that's pretty common and on par with other states. But what's not is that in our neighboring states, all of them have, in virtually every location, every city, every county, local options that stay with the local entity from a revenue perspective, and that's how they fund government. We don't have that in Mississippi. Rather, we get the money, or they get the money, from property taxes and car tax. So again, it's just pick your poison. I think somebody told me on the C Spire text line, and I know we got folks out there that live in the area could check this for us, that Mobile is 10% change, I think, the city of Mobile in Alabama, the all-in sales tax. So you shop in Mississippi at the closest county, 7%. Mobile, is that right?
Yeah, Mobile, Alabama, you've got the 4% state tax, the 4% Mobile County tax, and the 2% City of Mobile tax.
There you go. 10%. If 4% is you said that's local?
4% state,
county.
4% county, 2% local.
Okay. So that's where they get their money. Yet Alabama, I think, maybe does have a slightly higher millage than we do on property taxes. So they kind of get you coming and going. In Texas, to the point of the person on our text line that said, yeah, I'm paying these higher sales taxes everywhere I went. Texas also has a considerably higher property tax than does
Alabama's property tax is lower.
It's lower. Okay, that's where
Second
I may have
lowest effective property tax rate in the country.
All right, I think that's where I had it backwards, that Alabama, all of our neighboring states have higher millages than Mississippi, except Alabama. I had it reversed. So Alabama slightly lower.
Yeah, the effective tax rates, you're looking at Alabama 0.4%, Mississippi 0.63%.
Average, yep.
Yeah, and then the assessment ratio in Alabama, residential properties are assessed at 10% of market value, whereas Mississippi residential properties are assessed at 15% of market value.
Right. Okay. But they pay more sales taxes. So again, it's not like all these other states, they've cracked the code. They figured out how to deal with less. No, they still shake you down. It's just
and in Alabama, homeowners age 65 and older, or those who are permanently and totally disabled, are completely exempt from the state portion of property taxes, whereas in Mississippi, homeowners over 65 or those 100% disabled are granted an exemption on the first $7,500 of assessed value, which is about $50,000 in market value.
Yeah, so you get the old homestead exemption. However, though, you pointed something out I wasn't aware of. You said state portion, which means that Alabama receives some of the revenue from property taxes. And you know why, Rhino? Because you just kind of enlightened me on something. Because they only get 4% of the sales tax. That's why. So, okay, guys, we're going to have some of that property tax. I'm telling you, there's no magic formula here. It's just whoever put all these laws together decades ago, how are we going to get money to run these various levels of government? This is the structure they came up with. Nobody's got anything special. Now, when you get outside of the Deep South here, that's when things change. Because it's insane. I mean, exorbitantly insane what the tax burden is in the deep blue states. That's because they just spend themselves into oblivion. I mean, it's nuts, crazy. But generally speaking, if you look at these states we were just talking about, the burden is about the same. Now, I know you've seen reports coming from our state auditor that say, oh, yeah, our burden is higher. But here's what you got to consider in that formula. That's because our income is lower. It's not the fact that our rates are higher. It's that what's being multiplied by those rates is lower. If our income were on par with the other states, our burden would be lower than the other states. So, again, pick your poison. It's a good discussion. I don't like paying property taxes. I know a lot of people out there don't as well. It just feels like that's the tax people hate more than anything. And there are people that say, look, I paid my house off. Why do I got to keep paying money to the government to stay in it? People who say, well, half or more of that goes to school districts. My kids are grown. Why do I got to keep paying for that? You've seen all the objections. I'm 65 or older. I've worked all my life. I've paid taxes. I need a break. I get it. And so people are just sick of being taxed into oblivion. No doubt about it. Let's see. On the C Spire text line, Mo says, Gerard, this year's tax on 18 acres in Covington County, Alabama was $38. Interesting. Let's see. Yeah, Mike from Madison, we were talking about earlier the Supreme Court opinion on the mail-in ballots when they're received after Election Day. The Supreme Court says, yeah, it's perfectly fine to consider those. Mike says, I love that it happened. The legislature must take their job seriously when enacting laws. Hopefully that incident ensures they read what they're passing more closely. However, I see he's talking about the tax reform deal. You know, this was really an anomaly. I don't remember anything like that happening in the past where there was that severe, that significant of a drafting error. I mean, this was significant. This is material. We're talking about a $5 million test versus a $325 million test, roughly, but given today's numbers. So, yeah, I hear you, Mike. 3,000 bills, as you know, that flow through there, Rhino. Sometimes I think you and I read them more than they do. But, look, I do respect the fact that when they all run through, it's they start to get jumbled, and it's all you can do to focus on those that flow through your committee that you're responsible for. You do have to rely to some extent on your colleagues. But I will say that something as significant, as sweeping, as impactful as this, I just don't see how it went through that many eyes, talking about the tax reform bill with the drafting error. I just don't. And I've done presentations where I literally have a screenshot of the legislation where I highlight, see the 0.85 right here, and people are kind of shocked by that. But we'll see what happens. Doesn't mean the legislature can't amend it. And there is another requirement. I think that working the cash stabilization fund, I believe it's called, it's got to be filled. And so they could do some maneuvering like, yeah, we're not going to put the maximum amount, statutory maximum amount of money in there, therefore can't reduce the income tax. You can have stuff like that going on. So we'll see.
Sounds like a real great way to get your picture taken off the wall. If somebody is smart enough to figure out what they're doing.
On the C-Spire
because you know they're not going to come out and just say that. They're going to do that behind closed doors.
Oh, that's exactly right. I do believe that. This individual on our text line says, in Carroll County, we have some of the lowest rates in the state. That's good to hear. Why don't they work on cutting property taxes on only the primary home of an individual, not rental properties first, says Paul in Meridian. And that's exactly what they're looking at doing in Florida. But keep in mind, even though Governor DeSantis has really been promoting that idea quite a bit, and it looks like that may actually happen, which is really placing the property taxes on your personal residence, that which is eligible for homestead exemption. And by the way, that only applies to your personal residence where you live, not a second property. It has to be your personal residence. What he's saying is, we're going to exempt all personal residences from income tax, property tax, except there is a nuance, not the school district portion, which is more than half. Okay, so that doesn't seem to make its way into the headlines. The other thing is all the counties and cities are saying, okay, Governor, do that. We're going up on the sales taxes. Again, pick your poison. Final segment of Middays is next.
Poly up of Mississippi.
Are we going to do this? Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Louis from the 662 asked, we're talking about property taxes today, and we should, because this is a big thing. It's important to people. It simply means that I've pushed all the other stuff I want to talk about into yesterday that I collected yesterday and over the weekend, but no problem at all. Louis from the 662, Gerard, do renters therefore not contribute to funding schools, roads, etc., since they pay no property taxes? Well, Louis, keep in mind, they don't pay property taxes directly. They don't have an account with the tax assessor and the tax collector. They pay it in their rent. So the property owner, of course, is assessed and pays property taxes just as everybody else does. And they incorporate that and pass that on to you in the rent. So the owner of the property from whom the renter rents pays the taxes directly, but they pass it on to the renter. It's the same thing, Rhino, in rental agreements where utilities are included. That's what they'll say. Well, you're still paying for it. You just don't get a utility bill. And you don't pay directly. You're paying thus indirectly. Caitlin from Corinth says, my tag for my 2020 Chrysler Pacifica was almost $500 in May. I live in Farmington, so that added quite a bit to it. Yeah, so again, Caitlin, you're right. The city gets a piece of that as well if you live in the city, is the way that works. Bill in Tupelo wants to know how changing appraisal will affect county and city taxes. Yeah, already did, Bill, because they did that last year. So there are two components to the calculation. There's the tax rate known as a millage. That's just an amount paid per $1,000 of value, and the value is calculated in accordance with law. You went through it for us a minute ago. So it's the rate times the value. So if the value goes up, even though the rate stays constant, you're going to pay more taxes. As I was saying earlier, some jurisdictions in the state lowered the rate, the millage rate, to offset the increase in the value to keep your taxes level. Some didn't, and you realized a property tax increase as a result. It's the way you understand it, right, Rhino? Some acted, but most of them, I think, for the most part, just let it ride. And so your taxes went up. And I think that's honestly, Rhino, what got the conversation going as much as anything is people started getting their property tax bills, or they saw their mortgage go up, the escrow part of their mortgage, to account for that. Wait a second, what's going on here? I think that got the conversation going as much as anything.
Yeah, because a lot of them, the vast majority of them, hadn't been assessed since COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
When they got the ball rolling.
Exactly. And the other thing is, property in this country, because we're not building as many houses, and you pointed out all the dang illegals that flowed across the border, they also put pressure on the housing market. Even though they're renting, it's still, that increases everything. It's just more people that are living here. And
when you have increased demand from millions of people being in this country that shouldn't be here, layered on top of a seemingly foundational belief that property should be an investment instead of just where you live, you wind up with a scenario where half the country or more are priced out of it.
Exactly what's happening now. The median price of a home in this country, over $400,000. Outrageous. So Fortenberry physical therapy, I think from the federal government down to our municipal level, if the citizens felt like tax money was being spent responsibly, we would not be so upset about it. I hear you, and I do think there's some truth to that, but I don't think there's any consensus on what responsibly is. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I hear you. On the other hand, we got kooks that are running for Congress. I give you one right now. Milat, I think I pronounced it correct, Quiros. I believe she's 29 in Colorado. Their primary's tomorrow, running for a congressional seat in Colorado. And her big thing is Medicare for all. In other words, 100% socialized medicine, government-run health care. She wants to get rid, she says, quote, the only way we get Medicare for all passed is by getting rid of the Democrats that are actively standing in that way. She's also for all kinds of crazy housing. She says housing's a human right. And she wants free child care and open borders. I mean, the liberal playbook. Speaking of liberal playbook, what about crazy Senator Chris Murphy? He from Connecticut. He wants a $25 minimum wage. $25. Federal minimum wage. $25. Oh, that wouldn't have any negative impact on the economy. These people are economic imbeciles. They just don't get it.
Well, it's not just the economy. They're stupid all the way through.
Unbelievable is what she's calling for. And I didn't get to it today, but there's actually a bipartisan plan that the two senators say that are behind this, supporting this, authoring this, could save Social Security. That's Bill Cassidy, a Republican, who teamed up with Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia. I'm going to get to this tomorrow. There's some holes in this proposal. I know you're shocked at that, but we're out of here today. Ricky Matthews coming up next. Back with you tomorrow. Stay safe, and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.